Good evening, everyone, and welcome to one of the many webinars that RACE is conducting for the corporates. Those of you who are aware of RACE and not aware of RACE, I would like to quickly introduce RACE. RACE is REVA Academy for Corporate Excellence. It's an entity of REVA University. And the mission of RACE is to develop enterprise leaders, best in techno-functional training. And I am really excited for today's presentation and webinar because it is with one of the current topics that are there. It is about design thinking. And as you can see, the topic is about design thinking for artificial intelligence. So to just give a small brief, design thinking is a powerful framework and to blend non-linear cognitive thinking and strategic thinking for decision makers so that it helps them to drive value and achieve organizational efficiency. Now, what Mithun is going to present us today, it is not going to be a general presentation on design thinking, but a unique and his own model of design thinking that he'll be presenting today. So I'm really excited and I'm very looking forward for this session today. So I request all the participants to take notes and also please post questions so that we can address those queries later on. And the presentation will be led by Mithun, as I told you. To brief you about his profile, he's a global certified trainer and 15 years into data science. Can't skip with 3 of his training that he has done with the organization to main 3 of the main organization that he has done training is Planning Commission of India, Ministry of Commerce, and IIM Bangalore. And his hobbies are reading, writing, and creating contents for YouTube. Mithun has been a mentor, active mentor for all the participants with our programs, and he will lead us in the presentation today. Post that, we would like to have queries from all of you, which we can help you to solve those queries. Now, post that we have our director, Dr. Shinu from RACE, who would give you a sneak peek into the programs that are running in RACE. So without much wasting your time, I would like to invite Mithun to take it forward.
Thank you very much, Abhijit. I welcome all of the participants for this topic, that is design thinking for AI. I'd like to also thank Dr. Shinu and the RACE team for having given me this opportunity to present my views about how we apply certain critical principles and ideas about design thinking in the world of AI. Now, regardless of what avenue of life you're working in, you may be a purchase manager, you may be driving sales, or you may be in the field of education. AI is one area which has touched everybody's life. Now, the broad theme, the broad crux of today's presentation will be how we can fine-tune the process of AI by applying certain elements of design thinking. Now, by applying these powerful yet very, very simple methods, you can see the benefits that we can accrue from AI. So I will not waste too much time on the introduction. I'll jump straight to the agenda. Now, insofar as the agenda is concerned, there are 5 points which I'll be talking about. The very first point that I will be addressing about will be the existing framework in analytics. Now, there are multiple models out there in the market. We will be specifically focusing on two of these models. The second point that I'll be talking about would be the drawbacks of the existing frameworks. Now, as they say in English, for every ill, there is a pill. It's also equally true that for every pill we have ill, which means that there are side effects, there are challenges with the existing frameworks, and therefore we may not be able to do justice to the business problems. And therefore we will look at the drawbacks, the challenges of the existing frameworks. And third one, which is my favorite part, we'll be talking about the new framework which we will be proposing to address some of the challenges that we have seen in the second point. Fourthly, we'll be looking at what are the advantages, what are the key merits of the existing framework as compared to the earlier frameworks. And finally, we would conclude the presentation by speaking about one use case in the field of campaign analytics. Now, with this being the agenda, I will make a move on to the next slide. Okay. Now, there are multiple models in the market. Some of these models you will be already familiar about. CRISP-DM is one very popular framework which is used while we analyze our data. Now, CRISP-DM methodology is not something which is new. It has been in the market for some time now. This is a popular framework. IBM has sort of popularized it intensely in the last couple of decades. Now, just as you have CRISP-DM methodology, you have the second methodology, which is called as SEMA, which stands for sampling, explore. We have the next step, which is basically modify, model, and assess. Now, different vendors out there use different models. SAS mainly emphasizes on SEMA. If you're from SAS E minor background, you'll be able to appreciate that SEMA is something which is widely used. Now, Kaggle has their own framework as well. Now, the third framework which is prevalent in the market is what is called as KDD. Now, KDD stands for Knowledge Discovery in Database. Not something which is popular, but yet it is used in some places. The fourth one is a very popular approach popularized by Microsoft, which is popularly called as TDSP method, or Team Data Science Process Lifecycle, right? So this breaks down the entire world of analytics into different stages, and we will be talking about these different stages and how you can sort of leverage this in data science. We'll also be looking at what are the gaps in the prevailing methods. And the last three methods would be Kanban, which lays a lot of emphasis on visualization, visual presentation, and such things, Kaizen, and DMAC. Now, you'll be familiar with the last two methods, particularly if you have a background in quality assurance, process monitoring, and such things. So though there are 7 different approaches here, for the purpose of simplicity, I picked up two approaches. One is CRISP-DM methodology. The second one is item number 4 that you see in front of your screen, which is the TDSP method. Okay, now we'll be jumping on to CRISP-DM methodology. I'm sure that since most of you come from corporate sector, even otherwise you would have heard of CRISP-DM methodology. Now, CRISP-DM methodology, as I said, is not a new method. Around 25 years back in 1998, you had 5 companies, mainly Teradata, you had Daimler, you also had what is known as ISL, or Integrated Solutions Limited. They came together, they brainstormed, and they came up with this methodology, CRISP-DM, Cross-Industry Standard Process for Data Mining. Now, in today's day and age, we have social media, we have Facebook, we have WhatsApp, we have a lot of rich journal. But 25 years back, you could imagine we did not have social media, we did not have appropriate forums wherein we could talk about a standard process for data mining. People would do data mining, but it was mostly done in silos, and the best practices were not in the market as such. So CRISP-DM methodology served the community of data scientists for almost 25 years. It was almost the first attempt to standardize the process of data mining. And as you can see in front of your screen, CRISP-DM methodology sort of breaks down the entire life cycle of modeling into 6 phases. The first phase is business understanding. Second phase is data understanding. Third phase is data preparation. Fourth phase is modeling. And fifth phase is evaluation. And the last phase here is what is known as deployment of the model. These are the 6 phases that we see in CRISP-DM methodology. I'll move to the next slide. We can just unpack each of these critical elements, and we can just examine this in detail in the next slide. So as you can see in front of your screen, there are 6 different stages here. Business understanding. Now, what do we mean by business understanding? When we speak about business understanding, put yourself in the shoes of a data scientist. Now, when you're a data scientist, you will be an expert, more or less an expert in the different algorithms, like maybe support vector machine, like linear regression or time series. But one of the key things that you need to understand is about business understanding. So if your client is based out of UK or US and they are working for a telecom sector, I'm just picking up the example of telecom sector. You need to know a lot about the challenges of telecom sector, and one of the typical most popular challenges in the world of telecom is churn. People basically switch from one service to the other. So the question is basically, how do you reduce churn? How do you reduce a person migrating from one service to another service? Because if you ask a typical telecom sector person, he will say that in any subscription based company, losing a customer is like losing blood, right? You just as a person who loses blood continuously becomes weak. The same goes for a company. When you continuously lose customers, you tend to sort of become very, very hollow. You becomes very weak. So even before starting with data and such things, one critical element is business understanding. The second element, once you have understood the business understanding, you have assessed the situation, you have framed the business objectives, we move on to the second stage, which is the data understanding. Now, data understanding, we need to collect the metadata. We need to have an idea as to what are the key factors that we will be pulling out to address the business challenges that we have set for the in the earlier stage. Now, once the data understanding is clear, here you may have a lot of variables. Now, let us say you have a variable like FM. Now, what is the common practice? The common practice is to assume that FM stands for first name, FN, sorry. So FN may not be the first name. In fact, it may be the family name. So it goes to show that assumptions, when we make wrong assumptions, we may a lot of the times arrive at wrong conclusion. So this is where what is very, very important is to have a metadata along with the data. So that is about the second phase. The third one is real-time data is very, very complex. It is non-linear, it is dirty, it is very, very messy. So we need to do some kind of cleaning. In today's day and age, this phase of data preparation is known as data wrangling and data munging. So some of the important steps here would be identifying missing values, cleaning outliers, handling straight liners, so on and so forth. And the fourth phase would be the modeling, which is the favorite stage of most data scientists. Everybody wants to sort of run a quick a model. It could be a SVM, or it could be a linear regression model, or it could be a logistic regression model. This is the fourth phase. And in the fifth phase, what we do is basically evaluate the quality of the model. It could be a R-square metric, it could be F1 score, it could be prevalence, it could be recall. Any of these metrics tell us the quality of the model. Finally, we go on to deployment stage. Now we deploy the model in a production environment. Now, when you look at this at a very superficial level, it looks quite comprehensive. And CRISP-DM methodology is something which has served the data science community for the last 25 years. It is very, very widely used. But if you have used some of these, if you have followed this process, you will see that you will appreciate the fact that there are a lot of gaps. One of the main gaps that I would like to draw your attention to is when we speak about the very first stage, that is business understanding, you see quite a bit of engagement or collaboration to some extent between the data science team, which is present in India or any location, and the client or the end user. There is some level of collaboration. But the moment you go to the second stage, that is data understanding, somehow the client and the end user take a back seat, and the data scientist starts driving the show from collecting the data, cleaning the data, and such things, which goes to show that this is mostly a process-driven approach. The emphasis is very much on process. It's a step-by-step procedure wherein each critical element leads to the next, and it's heavily dependent on the process. Second important idea which I'd like to impress upon my audience is that the data scientist, from step number 2 all the way to step number 5, mostly the data scientist is the one who is leading the show, while the end user, the consumer of the model, takes a backseat. So these are two main challenges that we see in CRISP-DM methodology. Now there are other challenges as well, which I'd like to point out as we move forward in this discussion. So as I said in the agenda, one of the first and the most popular approaches towards analytical framework is CRISP-DM. The second important framework which I'll be talking about is TDSP. Now, TDSP is a framework which has been extensively popularized by Microsoft. You can see a lot of documentation about this. What is TDSP? What are the nitty-gritties of TDSP? I'd like to talk about it in the subsequent slide. Now, this TDSP process has broken down the model lifecycle to 4 stages. If I have to refresh your memory about CRISP-DM methodology, we had 6 stages. Now this has squeezed those 6 steps into 4 important steps. First being business understanding, very important because they recognize the fact that without understanding about the business, data science project itself is not complete. We move on to the second stage, which is about data acquisition and understanding. So as the name itself suggests, here the emphasis is about acquiring the right data to address the business understanding that we have set for ourselves. The third stage is modeling. Since I've already spoken about some of the models like logistic regression or support vector machine or time series model or a recurrent neural network or a convolutional neural network, I'll again not delve deep into it. So the third stage which TDSP emphasizes is on modeling. Finally, they deploy. They deploy the model in the production environment, and that would be the end of it. So these are the 4 important stages which TDSP emphasizes. If I have to unpack the earlier slide, if you see each of these steps, if I have to unpack this and give you a 100-feet perspective about what TDSP is all about, you can just see to the left side we start with the business understanding, that is setting the key business objectives, understanding what are the challenges in the business. You have to move anti-clockwise, and then you'll be able to see, my apologies, after business understanding, the second stage would be data acquisition and understanding. This is the second step that we follow. And here you can see different elements of data acquisition and understanding. Once we are through with the second step, we jump to the third step, which is about modeling. And finally, we move on to the deployment stage. Now, again, though at a superficial level, it appears that it is very, very foolproof and comprehensive. 3 important points that I'd like to draw your attention to is that it is again more or less process-centric. The emphasis is on process. Somewhere the human-centric approach is missing. Secondly, data science. You can see here right from the second stage onwards, it is the data scientist who drives the show, but the business user who eventually consumes the model result, he takes a back seat from the first stage, from the second step onwards. And thirdly, it is a very, very linear approach. It does not embrace the complexity of real-time data scenario. When we say business understanding, somewhere we are being very naive in assuming that the clients will give us the objective of the study. Now, I can tell you from my own experience that when we approach the client, many times the clients themselves might not be aware of what are the challenges in their business, and therefore they may seek hand-holding. They may put the ball in your court and expect you to figure out what are the potential challenges, what are the potential lacuna, what are the potential gaps in the current process. So it becomes the responsibility of the data scientist in a way to figure out the objectives and from there drive the show about data science and such things. So these are some of the gaps which are not addressed in the current process. Now there is a third approach as well, which is called as SEMA, which is popularized by SAS, which speaks about the very first step there would be sampling. Right, so too much of importance on understanding the business and such things are not given in the existing frameworks. Now, I know that this particular slide looks very, very busy, so please don't be intimidated with this. We'll not be covering each and every element here. But when you look at the row, when you look at right at the top, the column wise, you can see business understanding, data ingestion and understanding. These are the 5 elements of TDSP. You have the third stage, which is modeling, deployment and acceptance. And row wise, you can see the different stakeholders, the different the different people who sort of drive the show. You can see project lead, he has a role to play, data scientist has a role to play, project manager has a role to play, as well as solution architect has a role to play. Now, what is very, very conspicuous, what is very, very interesting to observe is this box here, which is the second row. You can see here, this is pretty jam-packed, which means that the data scientist, the person who's doing the job of modeling, the person who's actually doing data science work, he has a lot of tasks in his kitty. Now, if you look at some of the other people around data scientists, may it be a project lead, may it be a project manager, or may it be a solution architect, most of the boxes here are very, very silent, which means that he does not have, these people do not have much of a role after the first stage. And this is what is very, very important for us to understand in the subsequent slides. Now, all these points which we have discussed so far, I have sort of summarized in terms of the key challenges with the existing process. Now, the existing methods, may it be KDD, may it be CRISP-DM methodology, may it be SEMA, may it be TDSP, more or less some of the challenges in their approach are as follows. The very first challenge is lack of collaboration. Now, as I say in English, it takes two to tango. You need two hands to clap. We have the business side and we have data science team. Both of them should go hand in hand to derive something meaningful, to generate rich insights from the data. Now, in the existing processes, the big challenge is data science team, especially after the business understanding stage, drives the show all along till the last phase, as somewhere the business guys or the users take a backseat. You might have heard of the popular saying that 70% of the models which are built in a real-time scenario, the numbers are basically debatable. You can debate the numbers, but not the idea behind it. 70% of the models that we build in today's day and age simply does not see the light of the day. It simply goes to cold storage. Not many people use it. Now you can imagine, because the models, the wonderful models with high accuracy that we build simply are not consumable by the end user. Now, one of the reasons as to why it happens is because we are not taking the business along with us in this journey. So this is one of the key challenges that I would like to sort of point out. Lack of collaboration between the business team and the data science team is a critical challenge which sort of plagues some of the existing methods. Second important challenge that I would like to highlight here is lack of empathy. Now, unless we engage with the client at multiple levels, we will not be able to understand what are the pain points of the end user. Now, I may be building a model in India for my client in UK, but I may not be an expert in, I may not be a subject matter expert. I also do not know the UK market as well as I'm expected to know. And when I do not know these challenges, when I do not know these points, how will I be able to empathize with my customer unless I understand the pain point? So lack of understanding of the customer pain point is the second critical challenge that we have identified. Thirdly, it is a bit of an oversimplification when we assume that there is a single stakeholder and there is a single data science guy who is sort of catering to the needs. In a real-time scenario, what we observe is not an oversimplified situation wherein we have single stakeholders. In a real-time situation, what we see is multiple stakeholders that get affected with our solution. Any modeling project, any models that you build will affect the pricing team. It will affect the database guys. It will affect the sales guys. It will affect the top leadership. It will affect the sales team as well. Now, without looking into all of these aspects, if we just oversimplify and cater to one particular segment, we will again not be doing enough justice to the challenge that we have listed in the earlier slides. The fourth important challenge that we have observed in the current process is it is again following what is known as the CISO approach. When I say CISO, what I'm referring to is single input, single output. It simply does not take into account single input, multiple output. It does not take into account multiple input, multiple output. It also does not take into account multiple input and single input, what in popular language is known as CMO, MISO, and MIMO. So this is the fourth critical challenge that we see in the existing frameworks. Fifth one, I've already sort of spoken about this, that is the linear approach is what some of the earlier methods advocate. So the need of the hour is to sort of turn the tables and come up with a non-linear approach wherein we are not confined with a single stakeholder, wherein our solution basically addresses multiple stakeholders. We need to empathize with the end user, because eventually he's the one who's going to use the approaches and the solutions that we develop. So with this in mind, what we will do is we'll propose. The proposing part comes into picture slightly later, but we are going to use some of the important concepts of design thinking. I'm sure that most of you have sort of used design thinking and you have gone through this particular course. Now, design thinking was extensively sort of popularized a couple of years back by IBM. Now, there's a very, very simple technique, very simple set of rules, principles, which anybody can use. You don't need to be an expert in the field of in any field. You don't need to be a technical guy. Irrespective of what is your chosen domain, you can apply simple principles, commonsensical principles, and you can derive amazing benefits from design thinking. Now, what are these benefits? What are the principles of design thinking? This is what I would like to speak about in the next stage. Talk about design thinking. Now, you would have seen this kind of a loop structure. I'm impressing upon design thinking because this is very important for us to understand the subsequent slides. So I'd like to draw your attention to what is known as the EDIBT strategy of solving a very complex framework. Abhijit has already sort of spoken about design thinking in the introduction. Simply put, this is just a framework for innovation. This is a framework for innovation which anybody can use irrespective of what stage you are in your career. Now, what is this EDIBT technique that design thinking emphasizes on? First is, you can see here, these are very simple English words, but they have profound benefits, and you'll be able to appreciate the benefits in a couple of moments. The very first stage of design thinking is empathize. Now, in the empathize stage, as you can see, we are talking about what is the problem, what is the challenge. Now, when we say problem, this is a human-centric approach. Please note that this is not a process-centric approach. I repeat, this is a human-centric approach wherein we are interested in understanding what are the challenges, concerns, and problems faced by humans who are in the system, rather than placing too much of emphasis on the process. So empathize is the first stage. Now, once we are able to empathize and contextualize, once we are able to define the human context in the first stage, we sort of navigate to the second stage, which is about defining. Now, what do I mean by define? Now, when we sort of put ourselves in the shoes of the business guy or the marketing guy who's going to consume the model asset that we have built at a later stage, we will be able to better understand his problem. One of the important questions is, why is this problem important? What happens if we do not solve this problem? What is the impact that it will have on the process? What is the impact that it will have on our top line as well as a bottom line? So this is where the second phase, that is the define phase, comes into picture. Now, the third phase that we have to sort of embrace is the ideate phase. Now, ideate phase is very important, because once we define the problem, we sort of brainstorm. Now, when we say brainstorm, it is not just brainstorming from the point of view of the data scientist. We include multiple stakeholders in this process, which means we include the project manager, we include the solution architect, we include the data scientist, we include the data engineer, we include the subject matter expert. This is from the internal stakeholders point of view, because all of them will be affected by the solution that we will be proposing. The second set of stakeholders would be the external stakeholders, wherein we are going to take on board the sales team, the pricing team, the marketing team, the database team, as well as consider the third party vendors who will be supplying us with the data. So this is a phase wherein we are going to brainstorm extensively and come up with all the ideas that can be used to solve the problem at hand. So this is the third stage, ideate stage. I'll be making a move on to the fourth stage, which is the test stage. Usually ideas work very, very well on pen and paper, but the moment you sort of implement it in a real-time scenario, most of these ideas collapse. They basically do not stand the test of time. So it's very, very important that we test the ideas. When we say ideas, it could be testing a new product, it could be testing a new show, it could be any recommendation that we have obtained from the model. Is it really the case in the ground? Model results are fine, but we like to match the model results with the ground reality. This is the testing phase. And finally, once we have sort of once we have ensured that our solution works, we basically go on to the next stage, which is prototype creation. How do we create it? How do we sort of experiment with these methods? We would like to fail cheap and fail fast. So these are the 5 critical elements of design thinking: empathize, define, ideate, test, and prototype. Now we are going to borrow some of these ideas. So I would like to sort of impress upon these ideas once again: empathize, define, ideate, test, and prototype. We are going to use design thinking to address some of the challenges that we have spoken about in the earlier slide. So let me just make a move on to the next slide. Now, here is where a new approach which I was talking about, that is the fluid approach, which we are proposing comes into picture. Now, this is an approach which is developed in-house in RACE. Now, this particular approach, we believe, addresses a lot of challenges that we have spoken about from the point of view of crisp DM. It could be SEMMA, it could be KDD, it could be TDSP. A lot of the challenges could be addressed. Not just addressed, but addressed effectively, efficiently through the fluid approach. Now, one question that might be popping in your mind is, what is this fluid approach? Is this an acronym? Is this another fancy terminology? Where do we use it? Where should we not use it? So we will be sort of talking about this in depth for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So let us just unpack fluid. Now, when we speak about fluid, now this is a multidisciplinary approach. We are not confining ourselves to one single approach. We are borrowing the best points from design thinking. We are also borrowing the best points of cognitive sciences. When I say cognitive sciences, you can imagine neural network. You can imagine a lot of visual analytics principles being borrowed from cognitive sciences. So that is the second critical element. We have also extensively used some of the ideas of Kaizen in the third stage. And the fourth stage, we have used this Japanese technique, which is called as Kanban. And finally, the fifth element of fluid analytics is visual analytics. So a lot of emphasis on visual presentation and such things. Why? Because the end user, always put the end user at the heart of the matter, not the data science, because data science is just a ladder. It is just a tool for us to solve a problem. The end user might not be a data scientist. He would like a simplified presentation of the output. So visual analytics comes into picture. So these are the 5 different elements of design fluid technique. So this is the project fluid that we are presenting, and we will look at some of the elements of the project fluid in the next stage. You can see here there are 6 critical elements of project fluid. We will just spend some time discussing project fluid step by step. The very first element that you can see is what is called as a C stage, or the collaborate stage. Now, in the earlier slides, if you remember, if you recall from the discussion, we said that there is not sufficient collaboration between these 2 players, the data science team as well as the end user. So in the collaborate phase, what we are doing is basically to put a lot of emphasis on collaborate. Now, what are the critical elements of collaborate? As you can see below, there are three critical things that we do in the collaborate stage. One is to identify the stakeholders. Who are the key players in this entire game, right? It could be the project manager, the internal project manager, solution architect and data scientist, who are all internal stakeholders, and who are the external stakeholders who can help us in the mission that we have set for ourselves. Remember, against the background of human-centric approach, which means we are not putting a lot of emphasis on process, we are giving primary importance to human context, human challenges, and these things. The second important point here is to elicit the pain point of the end user. What is the exact pain point that he is facing? Now, it is not the pain point which is seen through the lens of data science. Now, you don't need to look at every problem from the point of view of the data scientist, but we are emphasizing on an inside out approach, which means the business stakeholders basically sort of come together and discuss their pain points. It could be about certain marketing challenges. It could be about certain other areas in terms of driving ROI, decreasing the mailing cost. It could be any of these things. So eliciting pain point becomes the second important point. And the third important point is empathizing with our consumer about the challenges that we have. Simply put, identify stakeholders, map the stakeholders, elicit the pain points of the stakeholders, and empathize with the end user. Now, some of these terminologies may appear very, very hazy. In the next slide, we have a wonderful use case about campaign analytics. So a lot of these ideas which we are talking about in this stage will become a lot clearer in the next slide when we speak about the campaign analytics. I'd like to go on to the next stage. Once we are through with the collaborate stage, wherein we have sufficient data points to believe that we have enough, we have mapped the stakeholders, we have elicited their pain, we have defined the human context, we segue to the next stage, which is basically to define it. If you are able to define the problem in simple language, from a business man's language, we will have enough ammunition to solve the problem. Now, when I say define, we are not, the definition of the definition is not building a SVM model, right? Now here, when we say define, we define the problem from the point of view of the stakeholder or the end user. We are defining the business objectives. We are identifying the KPIs or the key performance indicators. And finally, what are the key landmarks? What are the key analytical milestones that we will be solving, that we will be sort of hitting upon to address the challenges that we have set for ourselves in the earlier stage. So collaborate stage is followed by the define stage. I now move on to the third important stage, which is collate. Now, many times it has been my personal experience that when we have a data science team, there is a lot of emphasis on algorithms. What is a DB scan method, or what is a CNN algorithm, or what is a predefined method? What algorithm would best emphasize on what algorithm would best help me drive higher ROI? But here, this is a refreshing change that we are proposing in terms of the collate strategy. When we say collate, please remember, any model that you build is just holding a mirror to the existing process. So more than building a model, what we are saying is we have to leverage the original features or the original variables or original dimensions from the data. But please don't confine yourself to original dimensions. You have to take on board the end user or the marketing team and the subject matter experts, and you have to manufacture new features. I repeat, you have to manufacture new features. You have to derive new features. And how do you derive new features? Now, again, there are a lot of tools in Python called as feature tools and such things, which sort of do simple calculation and help you manufacture new features. But here we are talking about manufacturing relevant features. I repeat, manufacturing relevant features. How do you decide whether a new variable that you have created is relevant or not? the easiest way and the simplest and the most effective way to decide whether the feature that you've created is relevant, appropriate or not is to see for yourself at a modeling stage whether that variable is a key driver of the ROI or not. So harness the power of original features, derive new features. Don't hesitate to reach out to the third-party data sources. Third-party data sources, because in-house data many times is not adequate. It is simply not sufficient for us to drive high ROI. What we need to do is combine original features with new features. Never hesitate, never be shy of reaching out to third-party vendors, external data providers, because external data providers will be immediate. They will have relevant data, recent data, and that data can be used inside our model to drive high ROI. So to just refresh, collaborate, define, collate, these are the three important steps. I'll make a move on to the fourth stage wherein we are speaking about building. When I say build, please appreciate what we are talking about here. Now, to jog your memory back to CRISP-DM methodology, you saw the first three stages. Once we prepare the data in terms of missing values and outliers, there is a very abrupt and an inconvenient jump to building models. Now, that is a problem which we see as a serious problem with CRISP-DM methodology. So what we are saying here is that after the collate stage, you don't have to jump and build a model. A fancy model might not address all of your problems. There is a wonderful saying in English: if you have only hammer, then every problem will be a nail. So many times there is so much of emphasis on these fancy models that every business problem we try to address with a model. So here with fluid technique, what we are saying is that you don't have to jump onto a model. You have to sort of work on framing the hypothesis. How do you frame your hypothesis? A data scientist again might not be the best person to frame the hypothesis. We have to take the business stakeholders into account. We have to take them on board and form a series of hypotheses which will help us solve the business pain points. Now, once you frame this hypothesis, then you can use any of your hypothesis testing. It could be a ANOVA, it could be a MANOVA, it could be a UNCOVA or a MANCOVA, or it could be any of your non-parametric tests to address the challenges that we have identified in the very first instance of eliciting pain points. So very important, frame and test your hypothesis. The second stage is basically dashboard creation. Why is dashboard creation? One is because dashboards are very powerful. They give us early warning signals about potential challenges that we may encounter ahead. So dashboard creation is very important. Now, once you frame your hypothesis and build your dashboard, if need be, we will build a model. So model building is not the only weapon that you have to address the business challenge. We can go through the approach of framing hypothesis, testing hypothesis, dashboard creation, building a model, and next important element here is improvising. I'll make a move to the fifth important stage. Once you sort of build a model, we deploy. Here again, as you can see, we have highlighted what is known as MPMS. It is just an acronym for Model Performance Monitoring System. Now, why are we highlighting this and why do we consider this as a USP of Fluid? Simply because many times when you look at some of these discussions, there's a lot of emphasis on building the model and testing the accuracy and such things, and then you deploy it in the production environment. What happens after you deploy in the production environment? It is certainly not our case that some of the earlier methods do not address the deployment part, but what we believe is that model performance monitoring system is a very intense, it is a very robust approach in monitoring the models that we have sort of deployed. There are a series of steps wherein we track two important elements. One is the data drift. What do I mean by data drift? The data itself might have changed. Now we all are living in the COVID era. Now in the last 2 years, mankind has suffered great loss. A lot of people have died. So the population itself might have changed. It might be in India. We have seen a lot of deaths. it might be in UK, it might be in US. A lot of people have died, a lot of people have migrated, so the old patterns might not be relevant, old data might not be relevant anymore. This is what we are calling as data drift. The second biggest challenge here is about model drift. The old models might not pick up the new trends, new patterns. So model drift is the second element which we are trying to capture in the MPMS stage. Now, you can't keep building a model every once in a month, because every model is just like a tablet. Just as a tablet that we consume from the nearest medical shop has an expiry date, a model also has an expiry date. We need the model to be efficient and it should be able to relearn the characteristics from the data. So the second item here is relearning and further improving. So you can see here how we have systematically and in a very scientific way tracked each of the challenges that are present in the earlier methodologies, and we are trying to scientifically and very systematically address them through the fluid strategy. The final strategy here is about capitalizing. Now, it is all fine for us to build a wonderful model which works great, but what is the impact on the pain point that we had listed in the collaborate stage? Now, the best way to track the performance of the model would be, is it increasing the ROI, return on investment? Is it improving the yield? Is it reducing the cost? Is it increasing the response rate? These are four metrics that we sort of use to capitalize the model asset that we have built. Now, I'm certainly not saying that these are exhaustive here, but these are indicative metrics. So to summarize, there are 6 important stages in fluid technique: collaborate, define, collate, build, deploy, and capitalize. These are the 6 different elements, 6 different stages of the fluid methodology that we are proposing to address the challenges left behind from the earlier process models. Now, some of these terminologies may still not be very clear. So to clarify these points, what I will be doing in the next slide is to discuss a use case. But even before I move on to the use case, there's a high level study of the comparison between the fluid approach versus the current approaches that we have in the market. As you can see here in the table, we are listing out 2 approaches, that is CRISP-DM methodology and SEMA. CRISP-DM methodology, though IBM has popularized it, a lot of people use it. SEMA is an approach which is used by SAS. And the approach which I spoke about, which is the fluid methodology. We have taken 5 parameters for the sake of simplicity. We can actually take another 10 or 15 parameters if we want. The very first element that I'd like to draw your attention to is the empathy. Where is the empathy for the consumers, pain points? CRISP-DM methodology to some extent addresses this problem through the business understanding. SEMA does not do much justice here, but in fluid, through identifying stakeholders, through mapping the stakeholders, and through extensive discussion and using what is popularly known as the 5 why technique, we will be able to empathize with the business a lot better than the earlier 2 methods of CRISP-DM and SEMA. The second one is process driven. I've already spoken about being process driven. CRISP-DM is heavily process oriented. SEMA is heavily process oriented, while in fluid, though we take care of the process, again I repeat, a human pain point is the one which is at the center of the puzzle. All other elements are around the periphery. The third one is about prototype testing. In the earlier slide, I spoke about hypothesis testing and dashboard creation, which assumes precedence over model building. Every problem need not be a problem of building a model. Dashboard creation, developing relevant hypotheses which will address the challenges of business is also important. A fluid technique addresses this stage a lot better than CRISP-DM and SEMA. Fourthly, co-creation, very important, because we believe that the data science team has to work in tandem with the business, and we give a lot of power in this framework to the business and not just to the data science team. The final point here is about model maintenance. Analyzing the performance of the model, though there is some talk about it, it is mostly a very weak attempt to talk about what happens post deployment. There is some discussion in CRISP methodology, but they do not give a 360-degree importance about maintaining the model. In SEMA, virtually, we do not have much to speak about as far as model maintenance is concerned. And finally, when it comes to CRISP, we pay a lot of attention, we give a lot of emphasis on model maintenance. So this is the reason as to why we are putting a plus here. We are extremely human oriented, laying the emphasis on empathy, process driven steps, prototype testing, co-creation and model maintenance. With this discussion about CRISP-DM in the background, what I sort of would like to sort of talk about now is the advantage that Fluid brings to the table. Why is Fluid so important? As I've sort of said in the very first point, stakeholder identification. Who is the stakeholder? Who is the end user of our solution? Who are the internal stakeholders? There could be multiple internal stakeholders. Who are the external stakeholders that we need to take into account? So stakeholder identification is very important, and that gets addressed by the Fluid method. The second important point is about prototype framing and prototype testing. Third one is dashboard creation. Fourth one is model maintenance. And unlike the earlier approach, which only speaks about the CISO framework, that is single input, single output, we are here through Fluid also taking into account not just CISO, but CMO, MISO and MIMO approaches as well. Now, you may be curious to know as to where is there a case study which can sort of best illustrate the power of Fluid in sort of driving ROI. To address this particular question, I'd like to move on to the last important slide here, which is about the use case. But even before I sort of discuss this in length, I just want to check whether I put my participants to sleep or not.
No, Mithun, I think the presentation is going well, and please go ahead with your the final slide. We have few questions lined up. Definitely, I will address that post your presentation is over.
Great, Abhijit, thank you so much for the confirmation. I'll move on to the last slide. Now, the last slide is where we will be speaking about campaign analytics. Now, whatever I showed you earlier in terms of the different elements of Project Fluid, how has Project Fluid benefited a large insurance giant in UK? This is a large insurance giant which has been in the business for more than 150 to 130 years. They've dominated the UK market. We have sort of tested Fluid and the principles of Fluid through campaign analytics in this insurance area. We would like to discuss and give a high-level perspective about some of the benefits of applying Fluid in the world of insurance through a campaign analytics case study. Right. You've already seen this particular step-by-step breakdown of Fluid. Now, one of the first things that we observed when we approached the client, I'm at the collaborate stage because this is the most important stage. Now, when we approached the client and asked as to what is the key business challenge that they are facing, they were not really completely clear as to what are the challenges that they're facing. In fact, one of the guys stood up, one of the junior guys in the marketing team said that we are not able to drive high ROI and such things. But what exactly does driving high ROI mean? Why is it that you are not able to maximize on the revenue? Why is it that you are not able to increase the top line and the bottom line? Now, upon a series of questions, when the marketing team opened up, what we realized is a threefold problem that is existing with this particular insurance client. The first problem is complete absence of a scientific mechanism to target customers. They said that they're using what is called as a spray and pray campaign. When we asked them what is a spray and pray campaign, they said that they run these direct mailing campaigns. They don't have any statistical model, no machine learning model based on certain business rules and ideas. They send campaigns, and when they send campaigns, obviously, since it is not scientific, not many people respond to their campaign, When we asked them for the response rate, they said that the response rate is less than 1%. Because if you're a person like me who's very busy and you receive a direct mailing campaign, we cannot go through each and every detail. We usually sort of put it in the dustbin, right? So not many people read it, so not many people use it. Now just think of this. I spoke extensively about empathizing with the end user. Now, instead of jumping here and proposing that the solution should be logistic regression or let us use a CNN module, what we actually are doing is basically uncovering every element, every facet of the business problem. And this is only possible through the collaborate stage. If you just take a step back and analyze, when a person sends a direct mailing campaign, at least in an Indian market, there are multiple things that are involved. One is basically the postage cost, which may be around rupees 5. Somebody else has to basically come in with the printing cost of the letter, because when you're sending a direct mailing, you have to basically print a lot of details and you have to use a cover that may basically cost another additional 10 rupees. Your cost of handling, you have to package it, you have to basically put it in an envelope, which may again cost another 5 rupees. So when you develop a direct mail, for each mail, it may roughly cost you around 15 to 20 rupees. And when we ask them how many mails, how many people are there in the database, they say roughly about 30 lakh to 40 lakh customers we have. And this is because they are in business for the last 100+ years. They have a database of 30 to 40 lakh. Per direct mail, you are roughly sort of taking 20 rupees. Now, if you just do a simple mathematics and multiply this, you'll understand the total cost, which comes up to around 4.5 crore. That is a whopping number. 4.5 crore is the expenditure. Now, I don't think you'll have so much of liberty in terms of the budget. You'll not be able to spend 4.5 crore. And what is the benefit that you get? Barely 200 or 300 people may respond if you target 400 crore people. Oh, sorry, if you target 40 lakh or 30 lakh customers. How many people will buy? People who respond people who respond maybe around 200, but people who actually buy maybe around 5 to 6. What is so instead of this entire idea of targeting 4 lakh customers or 40 lakh customers and spending 4.5 crore, what we basically identified was that you do not have a scientific mechanism. So we moved on to the second stage, which is to basically define the problem from the lens of the business user. I repeat, define the problem from the lens of the business user, not from the lens of the data scientist. So you can see here, we were able to sort of define the problem here. We wanted to increase the response rate by 3%. We wanted to reduce the mailing cost by 13%. We wanted to maximize the yield, and we wanted to sort of avoid sending mail to the wrong customer. Why is the fourth point very important? Because this is not actually quantifiable. If I send a mail to the wrong customer, he'll obviously be annoyed and he may sort of unsubscribe me, which means basically I have lost a customer forever. So this is what we are doing in the define phase, wherein we are assembling all the KPIs that are necessary. Now we make a move on to the collate stage. And when we ask ourselves a simple question as to how can we best address the response rate, how can we sort of maximize the mailing cost, some of the answers that we got was you use the in-house data. They had created risk metrics and such things which could be leveraged. Yet there were problems because the pricing team, since the price of the products is very confidential, they were not coming on board. They did not want to share the data with the India team, because once the data goes out of your premises, it becomes very dangerous. So we had to board the pricing team and get details about pricing and such things. And the third one is basically don't just limit to the existing variables, manufacture or derive new variables. And in this case, some of the important variables that we noticed was we had the customer's income, we had the customer's debt as well. But both of these variables were not driving, were not so useful at the model building stage. So a simple calculation wherein we calculated the debt to income ratio, or evaluating the number of debt to credit cards, finding out the number of car loans. These are manufactured variables from the existing raw data, which had better predictive power. Thirdly, in UK market, those of us who are familiar with UK market, you'll realize that there are two powerful and very large vendors. One is Experian, second one is Olympus. They provide live data of customers, and once we were able to sort of get once we were able to reach out to these third-party vendors, they were able to give us a lot of features, input features, which we were able to incorporate in the model and improve the accuracy. Now, one critical element that I would like to sort of highlight here is, you may still ask, where is the business coming into picture? Now, it's very easy for me to say, please build a logistic regression model. One of the reasons, upon having extensive discussion with the marketing team and also the database team, one of the reasons we found as to why the response rate was low is because in the historical campaigns that the marketing team ran, many of the campaigns were sent to deceased people, which means that at the time when you collected the data, people would have been alive. Now people might have died, people might have passed away. So there is nobody to respond to your campaign, but you're still going on sending a campaign month on month. So we decided to cut down on this. Second is basically a lot of people had changed their address. Earlier, I might have been living in Jayanagar, but now since I've changed my location to some other place, even if you send me a location, even if you send me a direct mailing campaign to Jayanagar, obviously there's nobody to respond. We found a huge proportion of people who were in this. Thirdly, there were sensitive areas like Northern Ireland and such places wherein this was a bone of contention, and the team agreed that no such marketing campaigns will be sent to this particular area, Northern Ireland. So there are certain geographical areas wherein we felt marketing in such things would not be very profitable, so we avoided those areas. So upon using these business rules, as I said, it takes two hands to clap. It takes two wings to fly, not just a model driven approach, but we also used certain business rules, like we will not people who are diseased, people who have changed their address, people who are living in flood prone areas, people who have migrated to other places, or people who are living in sensitive areas. We will not be sending a marketing campaign. So this automatically resulted in response rate shooting up to a large extent. This also sort of decreased the mailing cost in a big way. I now move on to the fourth stage, very interesting phase, wherein we said that the decision tree model itself is giving. We built a model here which was giving us 70% accuracy, but we also said, let's hold on, let's not just go with the decision tree model, let us also incorporate the business rules that the business team, that the consumers are basically giving us, and we went with a hybrid approach of decision tree plus business rules to increase the accuracy to around 81%. So you can see here, this is the power of co-creation. When we say co-create, we use the power of co-creation in generating new features. We use the power of co-creation in coming up with scientific rules, not to target to certain geographical areas. Thirdly, it is not just a data science approach wherein we are just unleashing smart algorithms on your data. That is fine, algorithms are fine, but we are complementing it, we are supplementing it by taking valuable inputs from the business as well. So these are the four stages. I'll quickly jump on to the deployment stage. Very interesting. When a campaign is run, imagine that a campaign has to be run on 6th January. The next campaign is run on 6th February. Month on month, you are running a campaign for March, April, May, June, July, August. Now, this is where we started monitoring 6 days before launching a campaign. The model that we have built, is it still operational? Is it still functional, or has it become defunct? How did we do it? We just looked at what is called as the PSI, or the Population Stability Index. And if that particular score exceeded a certain threshold, we said the model is defunct, which means old patterns are not relevant anymore. This is very apt in the current scenario, because all the models that you are building in the post-COVID world so all the models that you have built in the pre-COVID era might not be applicable in the post-COVID era, because the data drift would have been tremendously high. Deploy stage, we have done extensive analysis about MPMS. Finally, very interesting stage, which is called as the capitalized stage, wherein we have generated what is known as a fluid score. Remember, we are talking about fluid here. At each stage, we have sort of given a score on a scale between 0 and 100. What we are saying in each stage is basically if a customer gets a score anywhere between 0 and 50 for collaboration stage or define or collate or build or deploy, and if the score is anywhere between 0 and 50, he is in the red stage, which means that he is when it comes to the fluid score, he has not applied the fluid techniques to the fullest. The second case could be there is a client who is using collaborate, define and collate to some extent, but not extensively. They will have a score anywhere between 15 and 80. That is the yellow colored stage. Lot better than red, but not good enough. The final stage wherein we sort of are giving a score anywhere between 80 and 100 reflects that all the principles, a lot of the principles about design thinking, which we had spoken about earlier, is applied in fine tuning and refining the entire cycle of model building. So these are the 6 stages which we sort of used from fluid methodology, from project fluid to drive high ROI to our client. To just summarize, we have seen the existing frameworks. We have seen what are the gaps or the problems with the existing frameworks of CRISP-DM methodology as well as TDSP. Then we proposed the fluid method. We also spoke about what are the 6 phases of fluid method, and with the help of a use case, I hope I've been able to impress upon my audience the benefits of using fluid to solve business problems. With this, I've come to the end of my presentation. I'll be more than happy to take questions from my audience.
Yes, thank you, Mithun, for such a wonderful presentation. It's a very detailed presentation, and we do have some questions, and I'm really happy to have this question because our presentation has made some impact and we have people thinking over it. So to start off with, the first question that is there with us is, what's the impetus for exploring design thinking for AI? So what is the force behind exploring design thinking for AI? That is the first question.
Right, it's a good question. Let me try and answer this question. What is the force behind using design thinking? Now, there are multiple reasons, but in the interest of time, I'll just focus on one main critical factor. And if you're able to appreciate this, I think that the presentation would be successful. Most of the approaches that we have in the current market, they're all process driven. I repeat, they're all process driven. There's a lot of emphasis on process. CRISP-DM is a process. TDSP is a process. Your KDD is a process. Your Kanban and other things, including your SEMA approach, there's a lot of emphasis on process. Now, with design thinking, what we are bringing to the fore is human element, that is the human-centric approach to solve business problems. Because remember, at the end of the day, it is the human beings who is the end user. That is the most important thing. And how is he affected by our solution, right? So we are not putting a lot of emphasis on the process. We appreciate the fact that there is importance about process, but along with the process, giving a human touch or identifying the pain points, putting the focus on humans, that is one thing which was missing, and therefore we felt that design thinking with this ED-IBT technique, with this ED-IBT stage, can best address the lacuna that are present in the earlier methods. Therefore, this was the impetus that that drove the fluid project. I hope I've been able to answer your question.
Thank you. Yeah. So I hope this answer,
and this is, I've just focused on one question. I'm not.
Yes.
One point. Yeah.
So we have another question that is, of course, what I see that this is a new concept and new idea. So how do you see the adaptability of this concept of fluid thinking, or how the industry will react to it? So your views on that?
I'm very optimistic and very positive that the industry will give a huge thumbs up to the fluid method. because I've been in this field for the last 15 years, and one of the questions that I've been always getting is right at the business understanding in crisp BM. Whenever I speak about crisp BM and such things, a lot of people ask, sir, crisp BM methodology is fine, but when we go out in the real battlefield, the clients simply do not give us an objective at all. So are we not a bit naive in saying that the business objective, everything will be given on a platter, and there we will take, we will sort of take off from there. So this is where I say that it is not about, it is not so much about the business giving you an objective. Many times we need to leverage subject matter experts. We need to take into account, we need to identify stakeholders, multiple stakeholders, identify stakeholder mapping and such things which were absent in the earlier methods, which we are incorporating in the fluid technology. And by doing this, by doing these three things, that is a stakeholder identification, stakeholder mapping, we will be able to sort of solve a lot of problems that are present in the current methodologies. So to just a short and simple answer is that I'm very, very hopeful and confident that we will receive a huge positive response from the industry as well as academic sector, Abhijit.
Yes. So this leads us to the next question, which is how can we implement design thinking for AI in organizations? So that is the next.
So I think when I spoke about the use case, when I just gave a detailed sort of step-by-step procedure as to how we can sort of board the concerns, how we can sort of use business rules, don't confine yourself to just models, how we can reach out to third-party vendors to improve, sort of add more variables, how we can focus on manufacturing new variables to drive highly accurate models. I think that should answer your question as to how can we implement this in the organization, Abhijit.
Yes. I see that you had 2 slides on the advantage of fluid thinking, as well as the difference between crisp DM and fluid. So if you can quickly take us through these 2 things quickly, so that we can just refresh on these 2 things. And then I'll finish off with the last question, which is not related to design thinking, but is totally different. But I will go into that after this question. Yeah.
Okay, a quick summary. I'll just focus on 3 points. When we speak about crisp DM methodology, it is process driven. When I speak about fluid technology, it is human-centric. We are not sacrificing on the process.
And the advantages of fluid thinking, that I think you had a slide on it, but you can just take us through that.
Fluid thinking is that we are following a hybrid approach, wherein we are just not leveraging, we are not treating every problem as a data science problem. Data science has a big role, but in addition to data science, we are also taking at every stage the inputs of the end user, right? We are co-creating. That's a very, very important, that's the one-line answer. We are co-creating the solution along with the end user. It is not a one-man show wherein only the data scientist is basically driving the entire show. We are using the business rules, business knowledge, business acumen, business inputs along with model, right? So this is a hybrid approach which differentiates our approach from the earlier methods.
Right. So I will just go to the last question, which is, of course, it talks about the question is, what are the requirements for implementing of Kanban system? So, of course, not to design thinking, but it is about Kanban system. Can you just take us through that?
Yeah, so Kanban is basically straightforward, and it is it focuses a lot on visualization, visual techniques, and such things to solve a problem. When I speak about design thinking here, we are using cognitive sciences. We are using the power of visual analytics in addition to deep learning AI models as well. So Kanban basically is slightly simplistic because we are doing a lot of challenges. We are addressing the challenges through just visualization, visual mapping, visual aids, visual cues to solve certain problems. It does not take into account cognitive sciences and such things to the same extent, to the same degree that we are taking into account in fluid. And that is one of the main differentiating factors between Kanban and design thinking, which is applied in AI.
Thank you, Mithun. I think we can stop it because we have though a lot of questions in place. We will address to them individually. Now I would like to invite Dr. Shinu Abhi for giving us a sneak peek into the programs that is happening with RACE, REVA Academy for Corporate Excellence. She has been leading this entire initiative, and would like to have very happy to invite her to speak about it. Dr. Shinu.
Thank you, Abhijit, and thank you, Mithun. It was a fabulous presentation by Mithun, and we are so excited about Project Fluid here. We hope that the world comes back to the customer that whom we are serving through this methodology. So REVA University has been always put their stakeholders in the forefront in all their programs, all their design of the training programs. And it is a very beautiful university located at North Bangalore. We have a sprawling 45 acres campus where again the students and the stakeholders are in the center of focus here. And please do look at REVA University's website to see what are the full-time programs that they focus on. I and the team represent REVA Academy for Corporate Excellence, where we have created a great vibrant ecosystem where we ideate, we develop, we design solutions which can help business to thrive. And in this process, we have support of almost 50 plus senior industry leaders like Mithun, like Dr. J.B. Sima, Ratnakar Pandey, and many who have been helping us to develop solutions which are impacting many lives. In this process, we have trained and changed almost 1,000 plus mid and senior executives' careers over these few years that we are in this area. We have designed 300 plus courses, again keeping the real cause why we are here. It's again a human-centric, empathetic understanding on the problems in terms of learning, in terms of the business problems that the participants are going through. That's the core of our design thinking as well. And we have a series of YouTube videos which we popularize. For us, learning to be created, learning to be shared. So we strongly believe that please do check our YouTube videos. I'm sure you will find a lot of interesting information as well as the tools which you can immediately start using in your day-to-day life. We are also very research focused. So this method of Project Fluid is coming out of multiple real-time solutions which we have implemented across organizations, and that is the reason that we have understood the pain points of existing frameworks and developing. And this kind of activities around projects, around innovations is what we thrive here at RACE. Again, in this creating this ecosystem with various partners, various marquee organizations, again with what is latest in the market, especially in emerging technologies in AI, analytics, cybersecurity, cloud technologies, and even leadership. Because for us, it's not leadership is inbuilt into any of this. We can't say leadership is to be secluded only for leaders. Every one of us are a leader, and every one of us must know how to solve problems. And that's the focus here. So in this journey, we get a lot of support. It could be program design, it could be placement support, it could be technical support, labs that we get from all these marquee organizations. And I'm just taking a few. We work with Microsoft Azure, IBM, Terralogic, EC Council, AWS, Security Innovations, and many more. A few are put here. And this is our program portfolio. I know that we have already crossed the time, but please do look at these programs which can change your perspectives, change your life forever. And that's the promise that we are making here. All our mentors, all our program office support individual participants to reach their full potential. And for us, It's not just an MBA, it is about changing the way that you think, look at the business on a holistic perspective, but also have a granular understanding on the pain points on the ground. How do we solve problems? So it could be an MBA in business analytics, or it could be an MTech or MS in AI, or an MTech MSc in cybersecurity or cloud architecture or security. For us, every program is designed with the participant in mind, industry in mind, the technological solutions, the technological changes that happening in this dynamic environment. That's how we designed the program. We are fluid, we are adaptive, we keep changing what is relevant, and we are, so that is the spirit of RACE, that which we would want to represent to all of you. And a series of short-term programs, and if you are really looking for serious career changes, please do look at it. And just one program which we would want to focus today is MTech MSc in Artificial Intelligence. To look at our program, there are beautiful reasons that you must look at this. It develops a holistic understanding. We are not only talking on models, but we are, as Mithun very fabulously explained, that we multiple stakeholders, multiple outputs, that and then anything in between. Are we looking at creating that kind of a skill set? So please do look at the program in detail, and it's a very technically oriented as well as problem solving approach that we do. But of course, it's an AICTE approved, UGC approved, globally relevant degree that which we are offering. So therefore, it has credit system. It is a trimester system. At the end of the program, you would actually do multiple projects, and especially 2 large projects, which can lead to a publication or a patent, and that kind of an ecosystem that we have built. And again, keeping you in mind. The trimesters, I'm going to skip that. For us, research, innovation, learning is in our DNA. Being fluid, being adaptive, being learning is part of our DNA, and that is the culture that we would want to create, whoever joins RACE programs. And the kind of projects that which we do, we have company-sponsored programs happening in EduTech projects. In terms of learning analytics is one of the key area that we are focusing on. Multiple customer-based programs, projects that which we focus on. We have our own trademark supply chain analytics projects as well. And we also are launching a new program in cloud architecture and security, again in association with AWS and Microsoft. Do look at all these programs, and we truly thank you all for joining today, though it is quite late. And again, on behalf of REVA University, let me take a special mention to Mithun's fabulous job on helping us unravel this or curtain raiser for this project Fluid. This is the first webinar in the series. We would be coming out with more on helping you to understand or adapt from the existing conventional models to more adaptive, more dynamic models like Project Fluid. And if you want to know more about our program, do connect with Abhijit, John, Basavaraj, Karthika. Their names and numbers are on the screen. And thank you so much. And we wish you a very good night. See you soon in the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Dr. Shinu, for taking us through RACE initiative. Now we will conclude the session. We looking forward to have you all for the next session. Good night. Thank you.